Alright, I've got everything out. I want to give you a quick view of everything out of here. This was kind of a bear to get this off. This was triple layered here, so I couldn't get my drill to it until I cut everything out around it to get my C-clamp drill in this way to get those off. That was kind of a major hold up there, but everything else is off. I went around and ground all the welded areas smooth. It's not completely ready yet, but got it to where there's no burrs sticking up where the new panel will lay flat. I'm going to test fit it now. I've got to let the car down to get the weight on the suspension before I actually mark it for welding, but I'm going to get a test fit done just to make sure everything's halfway close and I've got the right part. So this is the two holes on either side I was telling you about on the spare pan. That's these two holes here and here. And I'm going to make sure that will bolt in directly into those brackets, and then that'll be my locator, and I'll just work from that point back and weld it in. There's some places on here. Got some recesses right here and right here. I know that welds to the, not the subframe, but the little brace that goes from the subframe to the wheel well. So I'll be able to probably just drill right in the center of that flat spot. That's where the weld was. But over in here, there's no real markers to where the welds ought to go. So I'm going to have to drop it in the car and clamp it down and go from underneath and mark around the edge where it needs to be. And then I'll just offset from the edge how far I need to go in to do the weld. I'll have to just drill a hole or maybe use the punch in here where I mark it. Velvet Hammer just recommended that I get a punch. I got it here somewhere. Let's see where I put it. I think I put it over here in this toolbox. Now, I'd been looking at one of these, different brand, but I'm going to use this instead of my pneumatic one. I can punch these at any depth that'll go from here to here. I can adjust this thing back, and I got a bunch of little dies here with it. And it goes up to, I believe, 9/32, which is big enough. So I'm going to use that on this. I actually just sold the pneumatic one, so I don't have it anyway. So I'm going to use that punch on this, go around the outside edge and punch it. I'm going to have to measure from right here over to the on the panel, see how far this is, how far to put the hole. I don't want to get it too far away and the hole overhang the rail here and have a gap in the area I'm going to weld. I got to make sure I don't overlap that panel too far with the hole. In here, I'm going to have to spray some cavity wax in this area when I get done up through, probably through that hole there, because I'm going to burn inside here and I won't be able to get to that with seam sealer. These I could seam seal or also get some wax on it from this side and through the hole, but I can seam seal all this. This will get weld through primer because it's on the outside of the car. And the tail panel won't need it because it's going to get sealed on both sides, but I'm not going to seal. The factory didn't even seal around that on the outside. So I'll just have to put some weld through on that, and I'll probably be able to seal. There was some spray sealer underneath the frame rails there, but it wasn't really a seam seal like you see in here. It was more of a spray on a really thick, mastic or something like that. I just stepped on the pan. But I'll go around with the punch and punch all these out, and I'll have to get underneath and mark it once it's test fit for the rest of them that I got to drill out. I'm going to try to get it in there now. Alright, I just dropped it in there. It's a pretty nice fit. Got it clamped as much as I can get it. I can't get anything longer than this. I don't have anything longer than this to clamp it. So really from about here back, I'm going to maybe have to get, I don't want to put any screws through the frame rail to hold it down because that'll just weaken the frame rail, but I may get the porta power and just put the base of it here and then put a little bit of weight up here at the deck and just press it down with the foot of the porta power just to hold it down while I weld it. And that'll push this down. I can do the same thing over here. This is pretty well in contact here, but there's no way to actually clamp it. It's about 2 feet into the trunk there. I don't have anything that long. I did look underneath. The bracket under here is in contact with it, so whenever I drill these plug weld holes down here, I think there was 3 right there. It should be in contact to be able to just drill it. If not, I'll go from underneath and maybe jack the bracket up to it just to get it nice and tight. That's going to be the major challenge on this, is to get everything cinched down together where I can weld it. Have it in there nice and tight, but fits right. Looks the same as the other one. Still got it up on jack stands, but now that I know it's the right piece, I'll drop the car down. I'm going to go underneath and mark where I need to weld first while I can get under there. But I'll drop the car down, get everything ready to weld in on the pan, and then I'll mark it, clamp it in there. I may have to jack it back up with it clamped so it won't move, and then get some welds done while I can get underneath it and check everything. We'll see. Depends on how much it flexes. I'm going to clamp it in place now and drop it down and see if it tries to move at all. I don't think it really will, but next thing is going to be to go underneath and mark it. Okay, I've got you underneath the car. This is the rear tow hook here, back of the car. This is underneath. And right back in here, there's the bracket. It's got the undercoat on it right there. One right there. 2 holes in it. That bracket is welded in 3 places. Right there on each end. See right there. In the middle and on this end, welded to the pan. So I'm going to have to mark around that where the actual bracket, actually outline it onto the pan. And then I'll offset my marks just to where I need to drill, you know, 1/4 inch off each end and up from the edge, something like that. But this is where those 2 bolts go on either side through this bracket. This goes into the subframe. So these are lining up pretty much perfectly. I can get off enough to focus this. So these line up just right. So when I go to weld it in, I'll run some bolts in there to hold it down tight. Both sides look the same. Both look like they're lined up pretty well. That shouldn't be an issue. There's another view of the frame, what it looks like here as it runs back. I don't think I'll burn any of the finish off the frame. That's 2 or 3 layers there. So what I'll probably do is just come back along this seam and put in some of the same seam sealer that I'm going to use on the trunk on the inside. And then I'll spray all this with undercoat, just like the factory. I won't have the same material they use. It's a lot thicker than undercoat, but that's really all I've got. As long as it's undercoated, it won't look obvious it's been replaced. Alright, I'm going to try to show you what I'm doing here. These are the 2 areas right here where you can see there was a spot weld right there and one right up there, but there's 2 flats stamped into the trunk, the spare pan that I can probably just drill through the center of and get close, but while I can, I'm just going to mark this from bottom where the outline of it is, and I'm just going to put a little line here where the weld is, and then I'll offset by probably, these are about 3/8. I'll just put a note there for 3/8 inch. Inside, I'll just drill it 3/8 off that line, and I'll be about where the factory weld was. I've already gone back here underneath. This is the bracket that runs from the actual floor pan over to the spare. Marked around the edges, marked the center and the other edge. So I'll just offset on these about 1/4 inch from the edges here to drill inside the pan. But this will give me a guide so that I kind of know where I am. I'll get it back out in just a minute and start drilling and punching holes. Okay, I've gone around the edges and all these recesses, and I've punched holes with the 1/4 inch die. 9/32 was going to be a little bit big. I didn't want to have the hole too large, or I may have an issue with getting burned through on the edge there and melting through it. Hopefully this will be okay. I think it's a big enough hole. Looks like it'll be fine. All these punched. I'm going to try to adjust this back so I can reach this hole. And I don't know if it will reach this. It might. But I'll try to punch these. And there's some down here I'm going to have to flip it over and take my marks, and also these two right here, take my marks that I made and drill from the back side so I can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna go ahead and try to get these punched. Let me get this thing set and I'll show you a couple of them. Alright, I adjusted the depth of the throat here. It's probably around 1 inch, something like that. I'm gonna go ahead and punch these 3 along the back. It's not gonna reach those 2 at the bottom. It's a little too deep for it. Alright, I'll show you those. It's a nice clean 1/4 inch hole. Those other 2 will be where those yellow dots are. And I'm going to have to flip it over, drill. I'm actually going to have to go through these 2 layers here. That was a triple layer weld. Those 3 were. They actually don't have any spot welds in them right now because the factory would have welded this piece directly to the car, so there's no welds there right now, but I still have to drill all the way through it so I can weld from this side down through it onto that bracket that wraps underneath here. I'm going to go through and I need to punch these through here. I think there's 1 right there. And these will have to be drilled. I can't reach that. But I'm going to go ahead and get everything else punched out that I can. Okay, I'm down to drilling these 2 here. I still need to drill those really deep ones over here, but really thick spots. But these right here, the hole that I ended up marking is just about centered on those 2 pads. So what I'm going to do, because if I drill it through here, I'm going to have to try to get the burrs off down in a recess on the back. So I'm going to take a small like nail set, use it as a punch, and I'm going to punch those 2 spots there. I may just flip it over since it's basically centered and drill a hole through the other side. Either way, I'm going to come through the back on the inside of the pan and drill out this way so that these burrs are on an outside surface, so I can just hit this with the grinder and get rid of the burrs. Makes that a lot easier. I'll probably do something similar on the on these 3 spots up here. Alright, all the holes are drilled and punched. Got all the ones down the side on the frame rails. There's 1 that comes down on that brace that runs to the subframe. There's 5 welds along the back of the floor pan. I've got the 3 I punched here, and then the 2 more I had to drill. Drilled these 3 from the back side. You can see how they're kind of protruded out a little bit. I'm going to hit the burrs with the grinder, then I'm going to come back with the hammer and dolly and just flatten that back out. Same thing on the other side, all the way down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start, before I weld this in, I'm going to get this, these 2 stickers off, clean this up really well, and I'm going to go through and Scotch-Brite it with red Scotch-Brite, and probably not finish paint it before I put it in, but I'm probably at least going to maybe epoxy it or something just to give it some corrosion protection from things coming up off the road. Chip resistance, just to kind of give it a base for the undercoat. I'll try to get it on and get it undercoated within the time window of the epoxy so I don't really have to sand it. But I do need to put something on it, at least scuff it before I put it in there. I don't want to have to get under the car and scuff it upside down. So I'll at least scuff it. May or may not put some epoxy or paint on it before I put it in, but it sure would be a lot easier with it out. I'll decide that in a little while, but I'm going to go ahead and get the burrs off and lay it in there 1 more time, make sure I've got everything marked as far as where I need to weld. I might go inside these holes and put a little yellow dot on the car and then go back and grind that spot, make sure I've got it ground where it needs to be welded. So everything's ready to go except for dropping it in, and I'm going to have to go around and take the E-coat off around each hole, but I'll do that when I take the burrs off those holes. That'll kind of happen at the same time. So it's ready to drop in and weld. I just got to get everything prepped as far as taking the E-coat off. Alright, I've just dropped the parts in here just to make sure everything's gonna work out here. I don't have all the areas like the burrs on the pan and all cleaned up, but I've just set it back in there to see if it's gonna be close. I was kind of worried about this spot right in here where this recess in the pan protrudes out past the frame rail. I was wondering if that was going to hold back the tail panel from fitting in, but there's actually a recess right there in the tail panel that it sits in, so that shouldn't be an issue. It's all just in here loose. This gap will close up here at the bottom once we get everything completely in, but I just want to make sure that tail panel is going to go on. I'm going to leave it like that for the night, and I'll pull everything back out, start grinding the burrs off and getting the pan ready to weld in. I'm going to weld it along the sides first on the frame once I get the car dropped to the ground, and whatever else I can do from the top side, then I'll have to lift it back up once I've got it locked in place with those welds, and then I'll go ahead and put like a porta power underneath if I have to push that bracket up to it. And whatever else I have to do from underneath, I'll be able to lift it back up at that point. After it's welded on the frame rails, it's not going to move. So that'll be the first thing I do. Then I'll lift it back up in the air to finish it up and do the seam sealer underneath. I've got the area in the trunk masked. I'm just going to put weld through primer on the back third of it, I guess you'd call it, just to where it's on the outside of the car. The two rails are going to get sealed on both sides, so that'll just be completely sealed off from any kind of water intrusion into the welds. I've got the pan from about here over and down to here scuffed with a red Scotch-Brite where I'm going to put weld through on this. I'm going to put it from here up around these welds, across these, basically just the back end of it. And then while that's drying, I'll go around and scuff the rest of it. And I'll put probably 2 coats just to make sure I got plenty on it. And once this is completely scuffed, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the car. I'm not going to try to spray anything on it yet because I might damage it or have to come back and spray more on it anyway. So I've got this hood off of an 05, I believe, Tahoe to paint. It just got dropped off a few days ago. And the paint's peeling everywhere. It's cracked all over the hood. So I got to strip it basically. And it'll need a coat of epoxy. So what I'll do is I'll start with this when I've got the gun full of epoxy, so that when I'm under the car with the gun turned backwards, it'll still come out. I'll start with this and put 1 coat on it, then move over and do the hood. And I actually need to put some inside the fender there just to give it a little bit extra protection. So I'll just go ahead and put this in the car, weld it in, and I'll spray some epoxy on it later. I'm going to go ahead and put on some weld through on the back here. Wiping off all the loose lint from when I wiped it down. Could just blow it off, but this will be just over these spots anyway, so come back and sand it again once I get ready to put some undercoat on it. Alright, I'm going to go into the car. I'll put 1 coat here, and then go back to the trunk, and then back over to the car. Well, I'm going to do 1 more coat on each. I'll be back when it's done. Okay, she's scuffed. It's obviously not a 100% scuff job, but did the best I could with it. This is dry. Drop it in, get it fit in there. I realized I had this, it's actually a brake pedal depressor. I use it as a hood prop. I just take this off and put a little rubber cap over the end. Use it as a hood prop when I need it, but I'm going to put this in here if I can get it to fit. I think it'll be just long enough to fit down on the spare pan. I can pick it up into here and leave a little force down where I'm welding, so instead of having to put the porta power in there, that'll be a lot easier. I'm going to get this thing blown off and just wipe it down for now just to get the sanding dust off, and I'll put it in the car and I'll paint it later when I do the hood over there, when I epoxy that. We'll drop it down in the car and get it clamped in. Alright, I got her in there. Got it clamped in the rear as far as I can grab it. And I took the prop rod, put the base of it down here on that bracket that's underneath, just because this is a stiff point. And I just pulled it apart and pushed it up against the rear deck back here. That's got some force down on it right here. And it's nice and tight up against that bracket in the back. And these holes down here, I'm going to have to just wait to weld these after I get these done. I'm going to go around with a ball peen hammer and just go around this hole and kind of round the corners off of the hole down into it to make sure I got good contact. And I'll weld this in the back, and then I'll weld a few along the side. Then I can jack it up and do what I need to do underneath after I get it welded in. That way it won't move to do the sealer. I can really fully weld it like this, but I'd rather lift it up in the air so I can get a little bit closer to me instead of having to lean over so far. Alright, I've done those 5 along the back, 2 on either side and 1 in the middle there. I'll show you these 3 right here in the back, and then I'll work my way forward from there and do a few on the sides of the rails. Then I'm going to lift the car up and get it closer up to me. One. I'll let that cool down for a minute. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm just going to show you this one other one on the right here. This is going to be in the way, I think, of the other one by the time I get in there and have the welder in the way. Started to spatter a little bit once I burned the hole open a little bit bigger and it got into that weld through primer. That's why I scratch it out of the hole every time I go to weld, but this was a really deep hole, so I had to actually build up the puddle inside the hole and then come out. I just build up the puddle in the hole and then come around it. That's why it started to spatter. It's pretty solid weld till it starts to burn the hole a little bit bigger. Gets into the primer. Here's a close-up of those welds in the back that I just did. I'm going to do one right there, same place on the other side, and maybe 2 more, 1 or 2 more down the side of the rail to get it locked in place. And I'm going to lift it up. I'll be back when I got it welded. Alright, it's about 75% done. I got the rails finished. Those welded. I got the one in the corner back there, these 2, the one coming down into the pan. All along the side here, I did the middle. This side, there's 5 on each side, then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 left to do on each end, or each corner there. I guess that's 18 welds left. But I'm going to do that in a little while. I got that where I've got it where it's not going to move. So now I can lift the car up and do the rest of it. I'll fit the tail panel next. Make sure everything's good there. But I want to go ahead and finish welding this. I'm not reaching over the tail panel. And get the tail panel done. I want to go ahead and do the tail panel before I seam seal, because I'm going to burn off. If I seam seal in here, I'm going to want to come around this way also with it. So I might as well wait till the tail panel's in, and I'll seam seal everything at one time, just so I can have it all done at once. Be back when I get ready to finish welding this and put the tail panel in. Okay, the spare pan is completely welded. I'm going to set the tail panel in and just get it to kind of hold itself in there, get it wedged in there. I'm going to go get a bunch of clamps, try to get it set with the get the tram gauge and measure from here down to that drain hole in the tail panel and get that set. Then I'll just mate everything at the bottom, clamp it in place. Then I'll have to mark everything to know where to drill it or grind this E-coat off. It actually has to go in like this, behind this piece, and then be just rotated like this into the car. Get in there. It's in, but I got to get everything set, squeeze it back here and get it flush, get this measurement right, then I'll clamp it down. Alright, it's clamped in place enough to mark it to weld. I slid it in there. Once I got the rebar, bumper rebar holes to line up, I centered that and put 2 bolts on each side to hold it where it's going to have to be located so that the bumper bar can bolt to it. Pull this piece back to the gutter tight with this clamp. This is just holding it to the spare pan. That's the only ones I can get on it. The rest of it's way down in here. I'm gonna have to get a deeper clamp, or either maybe put some screws in the bottom, because this will actually be where I can seal it off with seam sealer. There was no sealer out here, so I'd have to put some over the screw holes once I took them back out, but I may come up with a different way to do that. I just need to push in the back. The spare pan the lip doesn't turn down where I can pinch it. It turns up, so I need to pinch it from the top. So that's going to be the only challenge really here as far as clamping it. I've got 2 on each end just to hold it in place. Those really aren't necessary. But I'm going to go around now. I'm going to put a yellow dot everywhere. I've got a plug weld hole along the side and the top here. And I'm actually going to trace around right here where I've got it so I don't grind anywhere past that line, because then it'll show. At least some of it might if I get too far down into here, but I'll put seam sealer probably down a 1/4 of an inch to cover anything up. Let me go around with the yellow paint pen, mark my holes that I know that I need to grind the paint off of. And I've decided I'm going to have to actually drill. I wanted to weld from the top in here in these 3 holes. But this is so paper thin that if I drill through this to weld to that, it's just going to burn through. And I've already got some cut throughs anyway and a full hole here. So I'm just going to go ahead and drill through it and weld from the back side, even though I don't want to. This is so thick here it won't burn through it. I think that was the only other thing I need to do, but I'm going to have to probably look at the old pieces and see where all the welds are along the bottom. I've got the weld diagram to show me, but I want to just verify where I need to do it. And I'm going to have to drill some holes. I can punch most of them probably along the bottom. Some may have to be drilled. And I may actually try to weld through this hole, because drilling through the frame rail gusset is going to be pretty difficult, but I'll get to that later. I'm going to mark all this first, and then I'll go look at the weld diagram. I've got it here. This will show me where all the factory welds were. If you can see that. I don't know how many it is. I can go through and count these, but it's probably up there near 50 or more welds that I'll have to do. But I'll be back once I've got it marked, show you what I've done. All of these are marked along here where I need to grind the E-coat off. I'll pull it back out, I'll know where I need to grind with those yellow dots. I just marked a little bit, a little yellow mark where the surface needs to be ground off, where the weld will be, just right there on the step. Same thing over here, down the side. And inside here, this is what I was talking about. I think I'm going to have to maybe try to weld through this hole to the frame rail gusset that's right back here. And when this thing was pushed in, it pushed this gusset in just a hair, but I didn't want to push it too far out earlier without knowing exactly how much. So I'm going to tap this back just to get it in contact with the tail pan. Same over here. This side's a little bit further out. I don't know if you can see that gap or not. I'm going to tap that back. I think once I've got it fully clamped in, it'll be in contact with it now. But I don't want to drill through that. It'd be easier to weld through here to these three places. Actually, it's just two right there. And they're really almost drilled through now from the spot weld drill, so I may just go ahead and drill them through it. Actually, about halfway through already, so that may just be what I end up doing. But I got to do those two welds, and then there's one on this side of the frame bracket, one on the other side, and one through this hole right here. I don't know if you can see that hole, but there's a hole there that a grommet goes in. There's a weld in there. So I'll probably do that from out here. I'll have to get the old piece if I can. I may just take the old piece I cut out and find where the welds were and overlay it here and just mark it. But that's kind of the route I'm taking now, is just to go find where all I've got to put my holes and where I'm going to weld everything from the inside or from the outside. I'm going to go ahead and try to figure that out and get it marked, and I'll be back when I got it ready to take back out and prep.